Welcome to Praying Through the Bible number 2, Genesis 4, 1 through 15, a prayer of failure. Cain is a failure. Examining Cain's sins, when we look at Genesis chapter 4, we see the first and the second great commandments broken. Those are reiterated by Jesus in Matthew chapter 22, 33, 36 through 40. All of life and every life, from the beginning to the end of the earth, are summed up by these two great loves. Loving God by being a faith worshiper, Genesis 4, 3 through 5, and like Abel, Hebrews 11:4, and loving our neighbor as ourselves by being our brother's keeper, Genesis 4, 8 through 9. As you love yourself, which is part of the second great commandment, shows personal responsibility to ourselves, which is another failure of Cain. Cain is a failure because Cain is not able. We notice first that Cain is not able to offer up an acceptable sacrifice. Now, physically, he has all that he needs to please God, but something is amiss that makes Cain not able. God tells Cain in Genesis 4 and verse 7 that if he does well, he will be lifted up. But will Cain be able? Cain must master sin, God says. But of course, this is another aspect of his life where Cain isn't able. Sin creeps at all of our doors, and we, like Cain, can and should succeed. But something makes Cain not able. Cain is not able to hide from God either, just like Adam and Eve. His parents couldn't hide. No one can hide from him who is everywhere. What a frightening or comforting thought. This wayward sibling falls before the Lord in a pile of his own spiritual garbage. It isn't that Cain does not have the God-given capabilities to triumph. We all do. But for some reason, Cain is not able. The main reason why Cain is not able is Abel obeys the Lord. If Cain and all the world's Cains, and that would include me and you, will take the I out of our lives, then Cain, minus the I, can be able. Okay, the bad puns are over, but the points will continue. When we examine Cain's sins, we notice that the narrative oddly does not focus on his sin itself. The focus is their effects, upwardly, outwardly, and inwardly. The failure to accept God, not accepting his inadequate sacrifice, leads Cain to failure to accept his own responsibility for his past and his present and his future. Changing our past is a feat that none of us can accomplish. Even removing our sins from the record of human existence is impossible. Forgiveness, that removes the guilt. But the sin is historically committed. That's hard to accept. So our focus must be on the effects of this sin in our lives, just as God focused on Cain. Chapter 4, verse 7. Cain fails life by breaking the first and the second great commandments, including loving himself enough to protect himself from himself. Very properly, Cain is punished by God. This is when Cain prays, pleading, "My punishment is too great," chapter 4 and verse 13. Cain now becomes fearful he will be treated as he treated his brother, which breaks the golden rule, Matthew 7, verse 12. And what does God do to this failure? Amazingly, God gives him grace. Chapter 4 and verse 15. Here's our prayer challenge. Ask for forgiveness for sins against God, others, and ourselves. And just as Genesis 4 is specific, we need to get specific in our prayer. We need to accept that how we treat God, others, and ourselves cannot be totally separated. Pray that both the actions and our attitudes will be properly combined, including loving ourselves by taking responsibility for ourselves. And finally, thank God for His grace, even when and because we are failures. That is Praying Through the Bible number 2, the Prayer of a Failure, Genesis 4, 1 through 15. If this has been a blessing, please share.